We are now live. The meeting of the City of Socorro Civil Service Commission is set to begin. First and foremost, the City of Socorro would like to thank everyone and ask for your patience during this difficult time we have been presented with. Everyone, please remember to silence any electronics to avoid sound interruption. No disruptive behavior or outbursts will be tolerated, and violators are subject to call disconnection and possible prosecution. In accordance with Section 418.016 of the Texas Government Code and by order of the Office of the Governor issued March 16, 2020, the Civil Service Commission of the City of Socorro will broadcast the meeting scheduled today, Monday, August 24, 2020, at 6:30 p.m. from City Hall Chambers, located at 860 Rio Vista Road, Socorro, Texas, via telephone conference and live stream in order to advance the public health goal and practice social distancing to slow the spread of coronavirus COVID-19. The public that signed up and any presenters will be called upon by the presiding officer during the meeting to speak during the public comment and their agenda item during the meeting following Government Code 551.042. La reunión del Servicio Civil de la Ciudad de Socorro está por empezar. Primeramente queremos darle las gracias y pedimos su presencia durante estos momentos críticos que enfrentamos. Favor de poner en silencio todo equipo electrónico para evitar interrupción de sonido. No se va a tolerar ningún tipo de comportamiento perjudicial o revoltoso. A quien no siga estas reglas, su llamada será desconectada y puede ser infraccionado. De acuerdo con sección 418.016 del Código del Gobierno de Texas y por orden de la Oficina del Gobernador, anunciada el 16 de marzo de 2020, la Comisión del Servicio Civil de la Ciudad de Socorro transmitirá su reunión hoy, lunes 24 de agosto de 2020, a las 6:30 p.m. desde la sala del concilio localizada en 860 Rio Vista Road, Socorro, Texas, por medio de teléfono y será transmitida en vivo para tomar medidas preventivas para prevenir la propagación de la enfermedad del virus corona COVID-19 a los demás y por la seguridad del público. El público y los presentadores serán anunciados por el oficial conduciendo la reunión para poder hablar durante la sección del comentario público o después de la discusión del artículo de la agenda por cual se apuntaron siguiendo las reglas del gobierno 551.042.
Item number 1, call to order. Alex Miranda. Alex Miranda.
Here.
Jesse Montelongo.
Here.
Albert Ortiz. Albert Ortiz.
Ms. Ortiz, if you can unmute yourself.
Mr. Ortiz.
Okay, I'm here.
And Ruben Garcia.
Here.
We have a quorum. Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4, public comment. We have no speakers for public comment. Moving on to consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
All motion for the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have lost Alex Miranda. So we have no quorum.
We're gonna try to connect him back in.
We have reestablished the quorum. Mr. Miranda has now joined the meeting.
Mr. Miranda, can you hear us?
Mr. Miranda, I need you to connect your audio.
There he is.
Mr. Miranda, we were in the consent agenda, and I have a motion made by Jesse Montelongo to approve the consent agenda. I need a second.
We're still trying to connect his audio.
This is Ruben. I second.
Ruben Garcia seconds.
Mr. Miranda, can you say yes to your audio connection?
So we have a motion made by Jesse Montelongo, seconded by Ruben Garcia, to approve the consent agenda. Alex Miranda? Jesse Montelongo?
Yes.
Albert Ortiz?
Yes.
We now move to the regular agenda. Discussion and action regarding grievance hearing for Brian Alvarado.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. We are here today. Mr. Alvarado, Brian Alvarado, has filed a grievance due to his termination. Don't know if you have the paperwork in front of you on the grievance form, so I'm going to go ahead and read his grievance. It says, on March 31st, 2020, I called my supervisor, Alejandro Alvarez, and informed him that I was feeling ill with chest pain and trouble breathing. At the moment, Mr. Alvarez instructed me to go into work. Upon arrival, I punched in and went directly to speak to Mr. Alvarez. He then directed me to go to work. assignment. After 4 hours of working at my assignment, I took it upon myself to call the Human Resources Department. I spoke to Ms. Rodarte and explained that Mr. Alvarez instructed me to come into work, but that I was not feeling well. Ms. Rodarte instructed me to go immediately to the emergency room. I followed her instructions and went to the emergency room at UMC. Once at UMC, because I did not have a fever, I was directed to see my personal physician. I then proceeded that same day to visit my personal doctor. Dr. Guillermo Parra, MD, informed me that I had severe sinus infection and further stated if I wanted to, he could check me for COVID 19. I selected to be tested for COVID 19. At the moment, I notified Ms. Rodarte that I have been checked by my personal doctor and informed her that I had severe sinus infection. She responded by stating that I needed to submit a doctor's note that stated that I can go back to work. I took a picture of my doctor's note that stated that I was excused from work from March 31st, 2020 to April 5th, 2020, and could return to work on April 6th. On this doctor note, it further stated that my results were negative for COVID 19. I texted Ms. Rodarte on the status and when I could return to work. Ms. Rodarte called and informed me that I was under investigation for my actions on March 31st, 2020. After a week, I called Ms. Rodarte again requesting when I could return to work, and she stated that a detective would be contacting me. Upon meeting with the detective, there was no charges on me. Investigation showed that the employees were not provided personal protective equipment. On May 27th, I received a letter dated April 8th stating that I had been terminated on May 22nd. This letter informs me that their intentions to terminate me was known by my administration since April the 8th, yet I was not informed until May 27th, 2020 when I received the letter. There was plenty of time for them to notify me since April 8th. This employment is my livelihood. It provides me insurance for my diabetes medication. Under the circumstances, I was left with only 2 days of my insurance and a week short of pay. And that is his grievance that he filed to the city, and that's why we are here. Um, Unfortunately, Mr. Alvarado did not call in to this hearing.
And Mr. Miranda, this is Mr. Kaler, and
Yes, sir.
What I would suggest is that we were prepared with multiple witnesses because Mr. Alvarado has not appeared. I would suggest that we put on one of our witnesses, Ms. Rodarte, who can go through the history of this. And then I think it's appropriate at that point for the commission to go ahead and vote on whether they are going to deny or sustain the grievance and sustain or deny the termination.
Okay, sounds good. That was going to be my question, to see what grounds or what actions we needed to proceed since he was not present for his own hearing.
Yeah, I think it would be best at this point to go ahead and briefly hear the evidence that supports the termination, and then the commission can go ahead and make a determination based upon that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, and with your permission, we would call Adriana Rodarte as our first witness.
Yes, sir. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, and Ms. Rodarte, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that you will testify truthfully and under oath today? Is that accurate?
I do.
All right, can you just briefly give us your position with the city of Socorro?
I am the city manager for the city of Socorro.
And do you oversee the Human Resources Department?
Yes, sir. At this time, I do.
And you also oversee the Public Works Department?
Correct, sir. I oversee all departments in the city.
Okay. And when did you first become aware that Brian Alvarado was having performance issues?
Mr. Alvarado has had performance issues way back since 2018.
Okay. And have you been involved in counseling Mr. Alvarado?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Had Rocio Marin been involved in counseling Mr. Alvarado, the former HR director?
Yes, sir, on several occasions.
Had Alex Alvarez, his direct supervisor, on multiple occasions counseled Mr. Alvarado?
Correct.
Okay. And and I just want to briefly go through some of the documentation. And Mr. Chair, at this time, we would move for the admission of the exhibits that we provided to the commission. Those are exhibits number 1 through 24. If we could go ahead and have those admitted for the purpose of
Yes.
this hearing.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. And let me just briefly go through a few of the issues with regard to Mr. Alvarado. What was the date that the incident that led directly to his termination, when did that take place?
That happened on March 31st.
Okay, on March 31st. Yes, ma'am. And let me ask you, had he been suspended from his employment earlier in that month?
Yes, sir. He was actually suspended on March the 6th.
Okay. And can you describe for the commission why he had been suspended earlier in that month?
He had been suspended for not following instructions or call-in policy. And this was it had happened multiple times. So that is the reason why he was suspended, since he was aware his job was in jeopardy and he continued to fail to follow instructions and our policies and procedures.
Okay. And that suspension is at Exhibit 12, correct?
Correct.
And you are the one that presented that to Mr. Alvarado, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you signed off on that, as did he, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you state in there that he was aware that his job is in jeopardy,
Correct.
okay? And you state in there, and this is another quote, that he was in direct violation of our policies and procedures. Is
And
that
any-
correct?
Correct. And any further instructions would result in termination.
Exactly. And so he knew at that point, and he knew before that, in fact, that he was very, very close to having his employment terminated.
That is correct.
And I'm just going to go through some of the prior, very quickly, the prior disciplinary actions, the documented disciplinary actions that he had. And on Exhibit 11, he had been late on at least 2 occasions, and he received a written warning on September 25, 2020. Is that correct?
Correct. Due to excessive tardiness.
And on July 9, 2019, he had been counseled by Rocio Marin for excessive use of sick leave. Is that correct?
Correct. Excessive absences.
And it's my understanding that he would, as soon as he had accumulated 8 hours of sick leave, he would take it instantly. Is that correct?
Yes, he would watch for the hours that he'd accrued in order to take time off.
Whether or not he was sick or not.
I'm sorry?
Whether he was sick or not.
Correct.
And on March 6, 2019, he was suspended. This was his first suspension, and he was suspended for 3 days because he failed to notify his supervisor with regard to an absence.
Correct.
And then he had received another written warning on March 1st, 2019, and that was because rather than working, he was driving around, not performing any duties in a city vehicle.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that was at Exhibit 8.
Yes, that's
And then on Exhibit 7, on December 27th, 2018, Ms. Marin and his supervisor disciplined him as he was not properly calling in when he was going to be absent. Is that right?
correct. He didn't call in till 10 a.m. that morning.
Okay. And what is the policy with regard to calling in?
You have to call an hour before your at least an hour before your shift. We do recommend that they call as soon as they know they're going to be either tardy or absent. But if you're going to be absent, to call 1 hour before your shift.
And before that, as set forth in Exhibit 6, his direct supervisor, Mr. Alvarez, had disciplined him on December 21, 2018, again for not calling in properly.
Correct.
And on Exhibit 5, on December 11, 2018, he once again didn't show up for work properly, didn't call in his supervisor, and he was reprimanded verbally for that.
Correct. He failed to notify his supervisor regarding an interview he had.
And so prior to March 31, 2020, he had been counseled by Ms. Marin, you, or Mr. Alvarez on many, many, many occasions. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
He had received multiple written warnings,
Yes, sir.
and he had been, in fact, suspended on two separate occasions, totaling 5 days of suspension.
That is correct.
And just a couple of weeks before, 3 weeks, a little more than 3 weeks before this incident, he had been suspended and told that any further infractions were going to result in his termination.
Correct.
Now, I want to take you to March of 2020, and I think all of us remember this time frame because it relates to the COVID crisis that took place. And just briefly, can you describe your actions as city manager, overall supervisor of all the departments of the city of Socorro, what you did when the COVID crisis came about, and directives that you gave to supervisory personnel as well as all employees?
Correct. So, beginning of March, we start hearing that there's this virus, COVID-19, and we start receiving information from the CDC. I do have a department head meeting on March the 9th, where all department heads are directed and provided material that they need to train their staff in making sure that they wash their hands properly and maintain their social distancing. Where they were told we're learning about this virus and we need to be take it seriously and be careful. If anyone experiencing any type of symptoms such as allergy symptoms, flu symptoms, not to come into work, that they needed to stay home and call HR. We have a list of questions that we ask in order to determine what our next step is. We really stress that. An email was sent out on March the 9th. Information was posted on all of the bulletin boards around, tables next to where the employees clock in. And on a daily basis, our supervisors reminded our staff of all of the washing hands, making sure that we keep our social distancing. And remember, back in March, things were changing so rapidly that we were letting our supervisors know on a daily basis what was changing at that time. But I recall during that time, it was the washing of the hands. If you feel any type of symptom, to stay home and making sure that you follow your social distancing.
And so, and we have the email to supervisory personnel at Exhibit 13. And then there are posters that are shown in Exhibit 15, including those at the Public Works Department. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And what was the directive if an employee had any COVID symptoms whatsoever? Should they go ahead and come to work? Should they stay home? What should they do?
They needed to stay home and contact HR. And I'm sorry, department heads were instructed that if they were to get a call of someone experiencing symptoms, they would notify HR immediately. That way, if we didn't receive a call, we were definitely making contact with them.
And you specifically had a meeting at the Public Works Department on March 20, 2020. Isn't that correct?
Correct. I visited the department right before their shift was over, just to go over how important it was for us to follow these guidelines that the CDC was giving us, letting us know we don't know much information other than we need to make sure that we wash our hands, make sure that we follow our social distancing. Even if you go home, you need to make sure that you follow this, because the next, Monday morning we come back to work, and we don't want to expose our coworkers or our families.
So let's fast forward to March 31. And I want to ask you about your involvement that day, and then we'll go over your investigation after the fact. But tell me what you understand personally took place on that day.
Correct. So on March 31st, I received a call from Ms. Mayela Granados, which is assisting me with the HR department, stating that she had received a text message from Alejandro Alvarez, which is the supervisor from Parks and Public Works, that Brian Alvarado had called in and he was instructed to call HR and not to go into work. After that, I did receive a call from Brian Alvarado. It was maybe about 8:10 a.m., telling me that he couldn't breathe, that all of the symptoms that determine COVID-19. So I did instruct him, you need to go to the emergency room. Do you need us to um, take you to the emergency room? He said, no, I can drive myself. And I said, you do need to go to the emergency room and then let us know after that what they've told you. At that time, I hung up and I called the supervisor, Alex Alvarez, and
Mhm.
asked him who he been in contact with, because we needed to send people home. He did say at that point, Mr. Alvarez already knew, because he had a list of names that he had handed out some face masks to 7 employees, which exposed all 7. So I had to send all 7 employees home, because at this time we really didn't know whether they had been exposed or not.
And based upon that information that day, did you conclude, based upon what you knew, that in fact, Mr. Alvarado had violated the directives that he had received with regard to COVID policies and procedures of the city of Socorro?
Correct. So that morning we had, several calls. I called Mr. Alvarez. I asked, when he called in, did you tell him to stay home? He said yes, that he needed to talk to HR to be cleared. He showed up to work. Alex, understanding was that he had already been cleared by HR. Then at that same time, I am being visited by one of the employees that he handed a mask to, which is Veronica Zamora, that came into my office. And she was very, very nervous and upset because her mom and they had just had a class the day before, since the mom has dialysis. And she was very upset, not knowing whether she had been exposed. She regretted the moment that she received that mask from Mr. Alvarado. Um, Extremely concerned. What I told her is, you need to go home, make sure that you social distance yourself, try to self quarantine in a room, try not to expose your family until we know more information.
And uh, in addition to Ms. Zamora, how did this impact other employees?
So at that time, Ms. Zamora was the only one that spoke up. It was not until I conducted my investigation where all of the employees felt a all sorts of emotions, right? They were upset, they were mad, they were frightened that this person, knowing how serious everything was happening you know in the world, that he would come to work knowing that he was sick and hand out masks, and just to some particular employees. They just
And did
couldn't
this have a-
understand it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And did this impact the city as far as its ability to perform its basic functions?
Of course. So we're a team of 24 employees in our Parks and Public Works department. So when you send 7 people home, it automatically impacts us. It makes us, we had to reschedule some paving projects. We had to halt those projects. We had to, our systematic approach was behind. Those 14 days really did affect the city in the way we perform and deliver services to our community.
And you also paid all of the employees while they were out on quarantine, is that right?
Correct.
And because of the nature of what took place, did you in fact conduct an investigation yourself?
Yes, so at this time, I had to make, well, when I found out that he had handed out masks, number one, I wanted to find out why. Why would you do something like that with everything going on, with CDC giving us the guidelines, with us reminding our employees every day, if you don't feel good, why don't show up? Why he showed up that day and he had 7 masks in particular handing out. So yes, I conducted an investigation. It took a couple months just because of everything that was going on. But on May 20th, I did question our 7 employees that were sent home. And all of them basically said the same thing. That his actions were irresponsible. So I made the decision to terminate at that time based on the history that we have with this employee that doesn't know how to follow instructions and violated multiple times our policies and procedures. We could not, for the betterment of that department and for the city, I had to make the decision to terminate.
And the basis for your decision to terminate, that's set forth in Exhibit 24, is that correct?
Correct.
And as you indicated, you had taken statements from Mr. Alvarado and 6 employees, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and those statements are at Exhibits 16 through 22, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it fair to say that each of those employees, apart from Mr. Alvarado, indicated that they were scared when they found out that they may have been exposed to COVID?
Yes. They were
That-
highly concerned because all of them do have families,
Okay.
have small
And-
children, their wives. So, yes, they were all concerned.
And so people are having to quarantine away from their families and loved ones?
Yes. They had, they were sent home and make sure that they isolate themselves.
And as it relates to your decision to terminate Mr. Alvarado, do you believe that he was given a fair chance to be a successful employee with the city of Socorro?
I think he was given more than a fair chance. Now seeing all the disciplinaries, I do work with my employees. I do try to salvage every single one of them. It's not cost effective to train employees. So I do work, I talk to them before we make a decision. But sometimes you have to make a decision for the betterment of the department and the city.
And had you had an employee in the Parks and Public Works Department who had been this difficult to manage, who had been so often in violation of the rules, requiring so much supervisory time to try and rectify his violations of basic policies?
I'm a true believer that employees are salvageable. When you would talk to Brian, he would try to make an effort, but then always would fall back to his old ways. Um, I do feel though that he was given more than an ample opportunity to correct, and he knows the policies and procedures. He just wished not to follow them.
Did you believe that as part of the investigation that he had been truthful to you in explaining what he did on that day?
Yes, if you look at his statement, it contradicts everything that all the other 6 people are telling us. What he told me, what he told his supervisor, he just plain out lied about every single thing. In his statement, he's stating that the employees asked him for a mask.
Mhm.
All 6 employees are saying that is in fact not true. They were handed that mask, which at the time they felt like, oh, nice, until they find out he was sick.
Did you believe that his behavior was insubordinate?
Yes, sir. He continued
Did you-
to follow instructions.
And that was an ongoing situation. I mean, time after time and after time, he repeated the same behaviors after being warned about that. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay. And that violates the standards of conduct in policy C14, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And there are also very specific safety standards and rules of the city of Socorro. Did you believe that he violated the safety standards that were put forth as it relates to the COVID crisis?
Yes, sir. He was given instructions to not um, show up to work if he was feeling any type of illness. And he chose to come into work and not even just come into work and expose everyone, but even hand out masks at the time. That is a complete act of insubordination. This isn't a joke. Um, People fear this virus, and it is our job to protect every single employee that's working for us.
And are you asking the commissioners today to affirm the termination and deny the grievance?
Yes, sir. I am pleading that we affirm this termination. We can't have these individuals working and exposing not just our staff, but our community by negligence and just actions that are irresponsible.
And do you believe that this action's put people's lives at risk?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have for Ms. Rodarte.
Alrighty. Do we have anybody else for this case?
And no, I believe that's all that we will present at this time.
Okay. Um, I believe if we need to go ahead and meet amongst us for civil service, for the commission, to see if we have any discussion, so we can go ahead and proceed with this.
Yes, that would be appropriate. Yes,
Okay.
if you can have a breakout in closed session.
All right, sounds good. If you can direct us how to do that, doing this, I mean, it's the first time we actually go through a whole meeting of stuff, so we can go ahead and do that.
Ms. Rodarte, do you know the process for that?
Do you want to go into executive session?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Yes, sir.
And then,
So,
and then also, how do we get back from the
Correct.
executive session?
so we have Mayela Granados, who's actually working the switchboard. So is Mr. Esteban here, for our IT. So what they'll do is they put you into a separate room where only you can discuss whoever it belongs in the executive session.
Okay,
And then once you're done, she'll put you back into the actual room. So you go into like a waiting room and then you come out.
okay, sounds good.
Okay? So we'll go
All right.
ahead and give us an opportunity to go ahead and do that.
May
Okay?
we,
All right.
Thank you.
could we just have a motion to move into executive?
And a second.
Make a motion to move into executive.
Second.
Alex Miranda,
Yes.
Jesse Montelongo,
Yes.
Albert Ortiz,
Yes.
and Ruben Ortiz. I'm sorry, Ruben Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, we are now live. We are back in regular session.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to deny grievance and sustain termination of Mr. Alvarado.
Second.
Alex Miranda,
Yes?
Jesse Montelongo,
Yes.
Albert Ortiz,
Yes.
and Ruben Garcia.
Aye.
Moving on to item number 9, set agenda for next meeting.
Soon.
Okay, do we have anything for next meeting or do we have a date for it?
No, we don't. We don't have anything for next meeting.
No? Okay, can we still just set the date and then if anything comes up, they'll let us know. And then if not, we'll just postpone for the next month.
Yes. So the next meeting would be on September 28th.
September, when was it again? I'm
The
sorry,
28th,
28th? Okay,
correct.
Perfect.
okay. Alrighty. If there's anything else, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Alex Miranda,
Yes?
Jesse Montelongo,
Yes.
Albert Ortiz,
Yes.
and Ruben Garcia.
Aye.
And we adjourn at 7:36.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see you guys again.
Good to see you, everyone.
Thank you.